So, we've got a story today that's all about a really dramatic transformation. We're talking about a defiant head of state who's now being portrayed as a frail detainee. We're going to dive into the two just completely different narratives around former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte and what all this means for his trial at the International Criminal Court.
First, let's start with the image that I think a lot of us remember. This was Duterte at the peak of his power, right? The strongman, full of bravado, telling the very court that would one day hold him accountable to go to hell. I mean, this was the face he showed the world for years.
And now, you have to contrast that with the picture being painted today from The Hague, a man who's supposedly just wasting away. Okay, let's get into this, because how we got from go to hell to skin and bones, well, that's a story packed with clashing ideas about justice, health, and maybe even political strategy.
To really get what's going on, we have to do a quick recap of how we even ended up here. From the presidential palace in Manila all the way to a prison cell in the Netherlands.
So the story really kicks off back in 2016 with the launch of his incredibly controversial war on drugs. Then it takes a huge leap forward to his arrest in March of 2025, which brings us pretty much to today, with his pretrial hearing getting postponed indefinitely just this past September. And let's be clear, the charge at the heart of this case is, well, it's about as serious as it gets. The ICC has charged him with crimes against humanity. We're talking about thousands of alleged extrajudicial killings during that anti-drug campaign. Now, these are charges he has, of course, always denied. Okay, so this brings us to that first major narrative, the one coming straight from his own legal team and his family. And it's a case that's built not on innocence, but on frailty. His lawyers went ahead and filed what's called a motion to adjourn. It's basically a formal legal request to just hit pause on all court proceedings indefinitely. And the entire argument hangs on this one idea, that Mr. Duterte is simply not fit to stand trial. And here it is, the official reason, word for word from his lawyer, Nicholas Kaufman. The claim is that a progressively deteriorating medical situation means Duterte can't even understand the evidence against him, let alone tell his own defense team what to do. Now, what's really fascinating here is this list of conditions. Some of these things, like myasthenia gravis and Berger's disease, have actually been public knowledge for years, but now they're being bundled together with this new claim of serious cognitive impairment to form the legal basis for why he can't face justice. But as you can probably guess, there is a completely different way to look at all of this. This counter-narrative, it doesn't see sickness. It sees a very calculated strategy. And this chart just lays out the two competing stories perfectly. On one side, you've got the defense saying he's medically unfit. But on the other side, critics are saying, no. This is a calculated ploy. They're calling it a PR rollout of weaponized grief, all designed to get out of a trial. Critics are arguing this is just the latest act in Duterte's long career of what's known as performance politics. It's a style where politics is basically treated like a stage show. For years, the performance was the tough guy strongman. Now they're arguing he's just switched roles to the frail, sympathetic old man. And you can really hear that sentiment coming through loud and clear from the legal team that's representing the thousands of victims of the drug war. They're explicitly saying they don't buy the health claims, framing them as nothing more than a desperate move to avoid being held accountable. So this is a crucial point, how this story is being shaped outside the courtroom, especially by his family. The messaging to the public has been really specific, and it's really worth looking at how they're building it. Just look at the statements from his daughter, Vice President Sara Duterte. When she talks to reporters, the message is, everything's normal, he's okay, we talked politics. But then, when she's talking to his supporters outside the prison, the message is totally different, much more personal and emotional. He's skin and bones. So, this question of whether there's a carefully managed script here, well, it gets even sharper when you hear about Duterte's reported final wishes. Some analysts are seeing a very deliberate kind of three-step play here. First, there's the request. If he dies, he wants to be cremated in The Hague. Step 2 is the narrative that creates. He's a patriot who can't even be buried in his own country. And the potential outcome, the whole story shifts from accused criminal to victim of Western injustice. Okay, so you have these two powerful, clashing stories. Where does that leave the actual case right now? What's the official status? The ICC's chamber did end up voting to postpone the hearing, but here's the thing. It wasn't unanimous, it was a 2-1 vote. There was a dissenting judge who basically argued that it was way too early to make this call. So that tells you there's debate happening even inside the ICC itself. And this is probably the single most important thing to take away from all of this. The proceedings are only postponed. They are not stopped. For the thousands of alleged victims and their families, the fight for accountability is still on, even with this delay. Ultimately, for those who are critical of this whole frailty narrative, they argue that focusing on his physical state, whether he's skin and bones or not, is just a distraction. They insist the real story isn't about his weight. It's about the substance of the charges against him, his alleged crimes against humanity. And that leaves us with the huge question, right at the center of this whole situation. It's a question that touches on health, accountability, and history. And it's one the entire world is now watching the ICC try to answer. Does being frail get to absolve a legacy?